You are about to cross into a world where fear is real. Real stories, unexplained phenomena, where the supernatural lurks in the shadows. From the Portal of Dread.
Story 1. The House in Boston, Massachusetts. Hello, spooky visitors. A most hearty welcome to the Portal of Dread. Prepare yourselves to cross the threshold between the real and the inexplicable. Dim the lights, put on your headphones and make yourselves comfortable, because today, together, we shall delve into a new chapter of terror. Are you ready for the unknown? Then like, subscribe, and leave a comment proclaiming, "I am not afraid." Now, let us commence. Have you ever sensed that inexplicable presence when you were completely alone? That sudden chill crawling up your spine, the unsettling certainty that unseen eyes are tracking your every move in the dimness of your own home. It is a primal fear, etched into our DNA from an era when darkness truly harbored predators. The dread of noises shattering the pre-dawn silence, of a shadow flitting at the periphery of your vision, of the premonition that we are not as secure as we might believe. What do the walls of an old house truly conceal? In Boston, Massachusetts, a locale where history is etched in blood and stone, stand residences that are far more than mere edifices. They are monuments to secrets, mausoleums of memories that refuse to dissipate. Envision a house of colonial architecture, ensconced amidst its brethren, its windows resembling vacant, weary eyes. Picture the aroma of damp wood and centuries of dust that greets you the moment you cross the threshold. The incessant creaking of floorboards, as if ancient bones protested each footfall. Now imagine those creaks emanating from a floor where no one treads. Conceive of a door, latched shut, suddenly slamming with violent force, as if struck by an unseen fury. What course of action do you take when a weighty object inexplicably slides from a shelf and shatters on the floor, unprovoked by any vibration, or had it provoked it? The sensation is one of invasion. A presence that not only inhabits the space but loathes it. A cold, malevolent intelligence that tests your limits, that feeds on your burgeoning fear with every whisper the frigid winter wind carries through the window crack. For the family who moved into one of these historical relics in pursuit of a dream, these phenomena were merely the prelude, the invitation to a nightmare from which there would be no awakening. This is their true story. For Marzio, a 46-year-old gourmet chef, the move to Boston was the realization of a lifelong ambition. The house, despite its antiquity, possessed the historical charm he had always admired. To him, every creak was a testament to the property's venerable age, every draft a flaw in insulation that demanded rectification. A man of logic and reason, Marzio viewed the world through a lens of cause and effect. Nothing transpired without a plausible explanation. His wife, Rosanna, a 49-year-old Portuguese teacher, was the family's anchor. Protective and resolute, she saw the house as a new chapter, a nest to safeguard her family, especially their daughter Gabriella. Gabriella, at 18, was the intellectual of the trio. Fascinated by history and possessing an analytical mind, she was eager to unravel Boston's secrets. However, an undercurrent of anxiety was a constant shadow, and her automatonophobia, a paralyzing fear of dolls and mannequins, was a silent torment that had plagued her since childhood. In the first week, life settled into the disarray of relocation. Boxes loomed in narrow hallways, the scent of fresh paint mingling with aged dust. On a chilly autumn afternoon, as she unpacked books in her new bedroom, Gabriella felt a shiver trace its way down her spine, a chill that originated not from the ajar window. She paused, scanning the room. It was silent, save for the distant murmur of her parents in the kitchen. Then, she heard it. A low, almost imperceptible sound emanating from within the wall adjacent to her bed. A rhythmic scratching, tsk, 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 like long nails scraping dry wood. She moved closer, pressing her ear to the cool plaster. The sound ceased abruptly, as if whatever resided within knew it was being heard. The sound in the wall was the first of many enigmas. Marzio, with his unwavering logic, they blamed mice or the house's aging plumbing. But the noises grew bolder. Sharp raps, indistinct whispers that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere. The sensation of being watched became a constant. It was during an attempt by Marzio to fix a loose floorboard in the attic that they discovered the source. Concealed within a secret compartment, swaddled in time-yellowed rags, lay a small wooden chest. Inside, nestled in worn silk, she rested, a porcelain doll from the colonial era. Her glass eyes, painted a vivid blue, appeared unnervingly alert. Her face, webbed with fine cracks, bore a delicate yet unsettling smile. To Marzio and Rosanna, it was merely a relic. To Gabriella, it was the embodiment of her deepest dread. The sight of that miniature human effigy paralyzed her, her heart thrumming with a surge of irrational panic. But what the family remained oblivious to was that this doll was no mere plaything. It was a prison. A local legend, whispered only by the neighborhood's elders, spoke of a woman named Abigail Proctor, accused of witchcraft in 1692. It was said that before being taken to Salem, she performed a ritual to imprison the demonic entity that plagued her within the object she cherished most, her daughter's doll. The ritual, however, was flawed. It did not fully contain the demon, it merely tethered it to the doll, transforming it into an anchor for its malevolence in this world. Despite Gabriella's terror, Marzio, in his bid to prove everything had a rational explanation, cleaned the doll and placed it on a living room shelf, treating it as a historical artifact. It was a catastrophic misstep. That very night, the poltergeist phenomena erupted with unprecedented ferocity. The house lights flickered erratically, cupboard doors slammed open and shut violently, and plates were hurled from the kitchen, shattering against the walls. Rosanna, ever the stoic, attempted to maintain composure, shielding Gabriella, who was in a state of shock. Amidst the pandemonium, Marzio rushed into the living room. The doll was no longer on the shelf. He found it at the top of the stairs, seated, its head tilted slightly as if observing the scene. His claustrophobia began to seize him. The hallway walls seemed to constrict around him. He snatched the doll, feeling the unnaturally cold porcelain, and locked it away in the basement. Damp, believing that by removing the trigger for the hysteria, everything would return to normal. But the silence that followed was even more terrifying. In the pre-dawn hours, Rosanna awoke to a soft sound coming from downstairs. She descended the stairs, and her blood ran cold. On the living room floor, scratched into the hardwood, was a single symbol, an occult sigil she had never seen before, and beside it, small, dusty, damp footprints led directly from the cellar door. The symbol scratched into the floor was the turning point. Marzio's skepticism was shaken to its core, while Rosanna's protective instinct drove her to action. It was Gabriella, however, who took the lead. Overcoming her fear, the young intellectual began a frantic search. She photographed the sigil and delved into the digital archives of the Boston Library, cross-referencing the house's history and local legends. Her findings led her to a name, Dr. Alistair Finch, a local historian and curator of a small museum in Salem, specializing in artifacts from the witch trials period. They arranged a meeting. Dr. Finch, an elderly man with a piercing gaze, recognized the symbol immediately. He explained that it was not a witch's mark, but a demonic sigil associated with an entity known as the Fear Collector, a demon that feeds on its victims' phobias. He listened to the story of the doll, and his face paled. He led them to a restricted section of the museum, showing them an ancient diary belonging to a judge from the Salem witch trials. For a moment, the family felt a sense of relief. There was an explanation, a historical context. Perhaps with Dr. Finch's knowledge, they could simply get rid of the doll and end it all. But that hope was brutally extinguished when the historian turned a page in the diary. There, drawn in faded ink, was the portrait of Abigail Proctor, and beside it, a note from the judge. The witch claimed to have bound the demon not to the doll, but to the fear the doll represented. The object is merely the gate. The key is the child's dread. The silence in the car on the drive home was heavier than any scream. Dr. Finch's revelation had changed everything. It wasn't the house that was haunted, nor the doll. It was the family itself that was under attack, with the Gabriella's fear serving as a beacon for a malevolent entity. Upon arriving home, they convened in the kitchen, the only space that still felt remotely secure. Marcio, his face ashen yet resolute, made a decision. We're burning this thing, now. He descended to the basement to retrieve a metal container and lighter fluid. The instant his hand clasped the basement door's knob, it slammed shut with a deafening boom, plunging him into absolute darkness. The walls seemed to contract, the air grew thin, and his claustrophobia struck him with the force of a gut punch. Upstairs, Rosanna heard her husband's muffled cry. As she turned toward the hallway, a sinuous dark shadow writhed across the ceiling. The shadow dissolved into hundreds of black specks that cascaded down the wall. Spiders. Thousands of them, moving in a chitinous, repulsive wave towards her, preying on her deepest dread. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Gabriella was paralyzed with terror. The doll, which they had left locked in the basement, now sat on her bed, its porcelain smile seeming wider, more malevolent. With an audible creak from its ceramic neck, the doll's head slowly turned towards her, and a rasping whisper like dry leaves skittering filled the room. Ella. Managing to free himself, Marcio kicked open the basement door and scrambled upstairs, finding Rosanna huddled in the hallway. Together they stormed into Gabriella's bedroom. Upon seeing the doll, Marcio was consumed by a blind fury. He snatched the object from the bed and, ignoring his daughter's screams, flung it to the floor and repeatedly smashed it with a crowbar he'd brought from the basement. Porcelain shattered into 1,000 fragments. For a beat, there was silence, a silence of victory. But then a low, guttural chuckle echoed, not from any specific point, but from the very walls of the house. The doll's shards began to smoke, dissolving not into dust, but into a black, oily fume that was absorbed by the wooden floorboards. The presence had not been destroyed. It had been unleashed. All doors and windows in the house slammed shut and locked with a series of violent, simultaneous thuds. They were trapped. Perfect. The false hope had been crushed. The entity is free of its vessel, and the family is imprisoned within the house, which now, it is the demon's domain. The final confrontation is inevitable and desperate. The demonic laughter ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. The house, now a mortal trap, seemed to breathe around them. The shadows in the corners deepened, contorting into humanoid shapes. The temperature plummeted, and the family's breath condensed into mist before their faces. It was Gabriella, the intellectual, who remembered Dr. Finch's words and the judge's diary. The ritual, the imprisonment ritual, was imperfect. We need to complete it, or reverse it. As Marcio and Rosanna futilely attempted to force the doors, Gabriella rushed to her laptop, searching for the photos she had taken of the diary. She found the instructions for a banishing ritual, a protective circle that needed to be drawn with salt and ash. The problem: they needed a personal item of the original victim, Abigail Proctor, to serve as an anchor and expel the entity. The desperate search began. They rifled through the chest where the doll was found, while the house rebelled. Objects flew, whispers called their names, and the shadowy figure of the fear collector briefly manifested in the reflections of the mirrors. It was Rosanna who found it. In the false bottom of the chest, there was a small silver locket tarnished by time with the initials AP engraved. It was the anchor. They raced to the living room, the epicenter of the paranormal activity. Marcio, fighting his growing claustrophobia, helped draw the salt circle on the floor, while Rosanna prepared the fireplace ashes. Gabriella, with trembling hands, recited the archaic Latin words from the diary. At the portal of dread, we know that not all stories have happy endings, and that confronting evil rarely goes as planned. As Gabriella uttered the final word of the incantation, the entity materialized in the center of the circle. It was not a monster, but a dark, distorted figure with eyes that were voids of pure darkness. It did not attack. Instead, it extended a skeletal hand towards Gabriella, and in her mind the young woman heard a proposition, not a threat. "Your fear has given me power. Give it to me willingly, and your family will live." The demon did not want to be banished. It wanted a pact. It wanted the key, not just the gate. Marzio and Rosanna screamed for their daughter not to listen, but the entity's gaze was fixed on her, promising an end to torment in exchange for her excellent. The confrontation has reached its apex, and the family faces an impossible choice. Now let us weave the denouement of this terrifying tale and leave the audience with an enduring chill. Time seemed to freeze. Before Gabriella, the entity offered a way out, a dreadful bargain. Gazing at her parents' terrified faces, she made her decision. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she clutched Abigail Proctor's locket and uttered the final words of the banishment ritual, not of submission. The circle of salt erupted in a blinding white light, and an inhuman shriek, laced with hatred and agony, echoed through the house, shaking its very foundations. The shadowy figure disintegrated into smoke and was sucked into the locket, which pulsed with an intense heat before darkening, becoming ice cold. The ensuing silence was absolute. Doors and windows unlocked themselves. The air felt lighter. The presence was gone. The family, exhausted and traumatized, fled the house that very night, taking only their lives and the now frigid locket. They never returned. The Boston house was sold, but no resident could remain for long, complaining of an inexplicable cold and a pervading sense of overwhelming loss that emanated from the walls. Marzio never again doubted what he could not see. Rosanna found scars etched into her courage, and Gabriella never again feared dolls. In fact, she rarely feared anything. The experience had left her with a void, an unsettling calm, as if the entity, in being banished, had taken with it not just her phobia, but her capacity for dread. And sometimes, in the dead of night, she wonders if this was a victory, or the final piece of the demon's bargain. What would you have done in her place? Would you have accepted the pact to save your family, or would you have fought, even at the risk of losing everything? If you have a true horror story, send it to us. Your experience could be our next episode. Thank you for braving this dark night with us on the Portal of Dread. Now tell me, would you dare to go through this? Share in the comments if you can sleep tonight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to receive more chilling stories every week. Sleep well, if you can. Until the next account, good night, and until next time. Portal do Pavor video. Remember, in Portal do Pavor, reality is more terrifying than any fiction. After all, the most frightening thing about Portal do Pavor is knowing that all of this really happened. Story 2. We bought the house and the contract came from beyond. The soft yellow light of morning filtered through the old maples outside our new home in Ashford, Vermont, flickering along the freshly painted walls and making everything feel possible for a moment. I breathed in the dewy scent of wild grass drifting through the open window, while Jennifer, my wife, dusted off a wedding photo, her smile a quiet promise that this was a fresh start. Even the hush of our ancient house cradled us, as though vowing us a peace we hadn't known in years. The day we bought the place is still sharp in my mind. The realtor, Mr. O'Leary, was full of those slow, neighborly stories, talking for hours about growing up here, about the old families, the legendary maple in the backyard. The wholesale was alarmingly simple. A smile, a handshake so cold it could have frozen my palm, and suddenly, the deed was in my shirt pocket as Jennifer and I laughed over our luck, rolling suitcases over soft pine floors. The paint fumes hadn't quite faded from the hallway when the first knock echoed on our door. It was a neighbor, Mrs. Rowley, hoarse-voiced, all nerves. "Funny to see someone finally move in," she muttered. I can't recall the last time this house had a light on, maybe before the fire. Old Mr. Norton, well, he died alone right in this very living room. Must have been 30 years ago now. Jennifer offered an awkward laugh. But hearing that name, a name I recognized from the realtor's sweet tales, made my skin crawl, all while I did my best to seem unbothered. That first night, Jennifer and I tried to cling to our excitement, but it kept unraveling. I noticed the lock on the front door stuck badly, every movement a jarring screech under my fingers. In the kitchen, a cabinet, which I could have sworn was secure, scooted open all by itself, a slow glide that made Jennifer's jaw clench. "Don't mind the noises," I remembered Mr. O'Leary chuckling. "Houses like this have their own quirks, almost a mind of their own." Night thickened over the house, a strange cold settling in. The aroma of fresh coffee faded, replaced by something aged and sorrowful, like a sweater abandoned in an attic. I caught Jennifer still-eyed, fixed on the ceiling, clutching her lists, but too proud to admit her fear. We didn't discuss it, but I felt it. Something was off. Maybe the price of our new life wouldn't be measured in money, but in whatever haunted the shadows behind our locked windows. When darkness finally weighed down on us, it felt as if the whole house drew a breath, holding us tight. We were left only with our unease, clinging to each other in a place that no longer felt like ours. I'm Thomas, a retired veterinarian who clings to his morning ritual of coffee and oldies radio, the steadiness helping me forget how easily the world slips by. Jennifer, ever the organizer since her days as a CPA, wakes from uneasy dreams with her chest tight, seeking her to-do lists in a desperate effort to wrangle chaos. "Check the title again," she scribbled nervously. "Don't trust appearances. We never fooled each other. Our differences kept us together out of habit and maybe dread of what it'd mean to be alone. Grief for our son, lost to addiction, knitted a silent thread through everything I did. Paranoia wormed into my mind, persistent and cold. Jennifer operated by routine, fixing wounds with data and lists. Her own mother lost too young, now just another line on one of her endless spreadsheets. This house, we'd hoped, was our last gamble, the grand gesture that would make everything right again. But long before we unpacked the last box, the place had begun whispering doubts. There was an uneasy pressure in the yard, tension I couldn't explain. In the kitchen, Jennifer flinched at her own reflection warped in the glass, swearing that for a split second, someone stood behind her. She laughed it off, blaming nerves. But that sense of being watched never left. We tried to settle in, filling rooms with photos and reminders of the lives we'd lived. Yet the patterns never stuck. My efforts with the garden wilted. Jennifer flicked switches and lit lamps all afternoon, afraid of early dusk. At night, the house pressed close. Sometimes it sounded like someone gasping behind shut doors, a cold echo of the night our son left us. Jennifer rearranged drawers compulsively, as if neatness could chase away whatever lingered. But denial only goes so far. The chorus of groans in the pipes, the shifting, heavy air, they became the new rules we lived by. We sat in our hollow living room, patching hope together with threadbare reassurances. All the while, I could feel something biding its time, lurking just out of our sight. By the second week, time grew strange inside the house. The Vermont woods outside kept their rhythm, but something inside began to bend. I noticed it first. The dirt in our yard stayed parched even after rain, bird feeders always empty by dawn, as if the ground itself was drinking in every ounce of life. I glimpsed a shadow flitting among the ferns, gone when I turned. Jennifer, with her logical mind, found herself chasing after little mysteries. Missing spoons found wet in the drainer, the kitchen clock freezing at 10:13 each morning, no matter how many batteries she swapped out. She joked nervously, and I echoed her laughter, even as I caught myself skipping the hallway after dark. On a particularly quiet evening, the doorbell startled us. Mr. T. Daniels from next door stood fidgeting. "Folks say nobody sleeps good here. Every so often you notice all the sounds just stop." It's not you hearing the silence, it's the silence listening to you. The words stayed with me long after he left. Soon the disturbances grew, thicker, darker. The hired electrician found a black dust caked on the outlets. When I wiped it away, a burnt smell hit me, followed by a flash. The old Mr. Norton hunched alone in pitch black. The dust always came back. Jennifer found our sales contract smeared with what looked like a handprint. Stark, unmistakable. Not there the night before. Jennifer saw a barefoot old man out back one evening. His feet hovered above the damp ground. We searched, finding only our own breath. Night after night, I swore I felt someone slip into bed beside me. Jennifer confessed to whispering she hoped was just pipes, not voices coming from the bedroom we'd planned for our son. Trust with our neighbors dried up. People nodded politely, but nobody asked us in or lingered on our sidewalk. The gate began to groan as if yanked from within, and the smell of wilted roses drifted through closed kitchen windows. The fridge sweated, and magnets thunked to the floor whenever we looked away. So we kept quiet, isolating ourselves even as the terror drew us closer. One Friday, we couldn't even leave. The front door jammed for 10 panicked minutes. Returning home, a hairline crack had split the living room's hardwood, growing imperceptibly each night. It felt like the house itself was sending us a warning. Something inside had finally woken and wanted to be recognized. At 4:26 a.m., Jennifer jolted awake, weighted by dread. In the darkness, there was a musty scent, one that reminded her of childhood fears long thought buried. She heard dragging feet down the hallway, too heavy for her, too light for me, and felt, just for a heartbeat, that if she made a sound, something would answer. By daylight, I found her at the breakfast table, scribbling endless lists. Desperate for a shred of control, I said nothing, but I knew. I could feel regret cramping my chest. The room meant for our son was different now. Lights flickered in my presence. Mold crept into my dreams. One afternoon, buried in his old closet, I found a scrap of paper, new, out of place, gouged with the word "gone" over and over until it nearly broke through. The raw scent of rain-soaked earth filled my nose, and I knew the house recognized my pain and was feeding on it. The house made us strangers to ourselves. Jennifer stopped looking in mirrors, afraid she might see something staring back that didn't entirely belong to her. A third presence settled among us, anxiety, alive and barbed. I found myself stalking the windows, sure the neighbors were watching, sure the phone would ring and I'd only hear a scraping, ragged breath. Jennifer started getting sick. Nausea she couldn't explain, sharp pains for which no doctor had a diagnosis. I saw her one night approaching my shadow in the living room, but stopping short, startled, her voice trembling when she admitted that for a second she wasn't sure it was me at all. Her nights blurred into feverish visions. She saw pale, faceless crowds swirling outside beneath the trees, repeating names she'd almost forgotten. I lost track of where I was in the house. Corridors seemed to stretch, pulling me under. Any hope we had turned brittle with fear, and pretending everything was normal exhausted us both more than fear itself. Each passing day, it felt like the house was peeling us apart, pulling loose every old wound we tried to keep hidden. Time and identity blurred, sucked away by whatever waited just beyond the next closed door. Night after night, we felt ourselves seeping away, splinter by splinter, but too afraid to leave. The sky finally broke gray over Ashford, thick and lifeless. I skimmed through a dusty local newspaper, my only lifeline to a world that felt farther every day. Jennifer glanced at a small column and paled. Townhouse on Sycamore Road back on the market. Again. Locals report chronic insomnia and uncanny atmosphere. Our address. The warning was too late. Around noon, the TV flickered to life by some miracle, just in time for a news flash. Another family leaves infamous Maple District property. A thin woman told the reporter. I spent weeks hearing voices in the yard. You just start remembering things that were never yours. The words echoed deep inside Jennifer. Desperate for answers, she phoned her mother. On the other end, the story poured out. Your Nana, Back at the farm, used to whisper about voices tapping from behind the walls like the dead still wanted company. You know your grandpa didn't believe her, till that night the kitchen smelled like soured milk for weeks. Jennifer hung up cold, convinced that the curse had come around again. We dashed to the Ashford County Records Office, combing public deeds and police files. The house switched owners at least every 3 years since 1968. Neighbors reported pets going missing, mysterious crying from behind the fence. The previous owner left after hallucinations. Heading back, a leathery old man stopped us. My cousin worked that land. August nights he'd find blood leaking out the old fence, avoid staring into the emptiness. That day, Jennifer found a battered photo album left by a forgotten family. The faces were blurred, their smiles stiff. On the back of a photo dated 1974, someone had scribbled, "Elias never woke up." News around town got stranger. Power outages in certain streets, stories of shadows crossing the fields at sundown, rumors of residual presences in farmhouses marked by accidents and drownings. She found hauntingly similar stories online. Families in small towns losing their grip, their nightmares feeding on each other until the boundary between reality and legend dissolved. The horror pressing on us wasn't just a feeling. Records proved others had lived and lost, just as we were. That night, a distant ambulance wailed along the highway, the routine call for this stretch of road. Jennifer and I realized the nightmare had roots, growing fresh branches with every family unlucky enough to move in. Twilight came with no warning. The air outside sucked dry of any bird song or crickets. Jennifer heard the living room clock quit ticking. In the bedroom I was mumbling, my body there but my mind sliding elsewhere. She felt a change in the air beneath the door, a stale, cold draft tinged with burnt coffee, and under everything that static buzz, like voices weathered by static. Fam, never, home. She couldn't move, pinned with a certainty that someone was clinking silverware in the kitchen, someone who couldn't possibly be there. Stories she'd read ran through her mind, people immobilized by everyday absurdities, never getting out of bed again after finally seeing their world crack open. Suddenly, I stumbled into the living room, eyes wild, barely seeing her. I scraped my knees on the old floorboards but felt nothing. With a voice I hardly recognized, I blurted out, "I heard them. They want in. We have to hold them out." The air filled with the sharp tang of rust and something rotten. At that moment, the phone shrieked, an ugly, urgent ring. When Jennifer picked up, a woman's voice, echoed by a dozen others, hissed, "Look outside. Look at your yard." Barely feeling her legs, Jennifer opened the back door. The porch light struggled and failed against the dark. The leaves in the old maple whispered like bones. Hanging in the air, a thick rope swayed, anchored to nothing, and in the yard, a circle of shadow people joined hands, their faces caved in, mouths open in soundless chanting, spinning faster and faster under the clouds. Their dirty hands pointed at the house, at Jennifer. Frozen, she felt not only her own childhood terrors but the agony of everyone who'd ever existed within those walls. The scent of spoiled milk returned, and when she tried to scream, nothing came. She forced herself back inside, finding me collapsed, clawing desperate, useless marks into the plaster, sweat pooling under my chin. All around the world howled, the sink dripped, the window panes shook, sparks spat from the oven. The doorbell rang just once. The doorknob twisted again and again, but no one was there, just the overwhelming, hungry darkness. A siren screamed nearby, and the house trembled. Jennifer's only thought, "They're coming in." She saw, horribly clear, that the only line left between surviving and becoming part of the house was whether she could resist for just a few more seconds. Clutching my limp body to her, she let the tears fall in silence, realizing the purest terror wasn't dying, but becoming part of this place. No one is ever just a victim here. Eventually, everyone belongs. When the first thin sunlight crawled through the blinds, Jennifer sat huddled in the hallway, and I was insensible, eyes glassy, trapped in my own nightmares. We were both worn to the bone. Two people reduced by walls that seemed tighter every morning, tainted by that stench of old milk clinging everywhere. Days blurred. Local news reported accidents, animal deaths, disappearances, all on our street. Neighbors whispered. The Maples claimed another. Jennifer realized the house wasn't a home, it was a living thing. Time stopped for me. I traced the widening cracks in the boards, convinced that rope swayed at the edge of my sight. My rage snapped constantly, and my muttered warnings about them in the walls grew almost normal. No one dared wake me when I whispered in the witching hour. Every attempt at normalcy fell apart. Lights flickered. That damp, nostalgic scent returned, and Jennifer's reflection in the microwave sometimes blinked back with someone else's eyes. She tried to drive away. Every road curved back to the house. In town, people looked away. A neighbor muttered, "Now I hear the voices too." Her dreams recycled strangers' suffering. She saw a woman dragged into the yard, a girl weeping in the attic. She felt herself being overwritten, old identities mixing with something else. She began to find strange bruises, sharp scratches across her thighs, cold fingers clutching her ankle under the sheets, the weight of a phantom body crushing her chest. My unraveling ended at a psych ward after I tried to find the way out of the circle in the backyard. The doctors could only guess, but Jennifer knew. It was the truth no one wanted. I never returned, lost to whatever hunger lived behind that peeling paint, mumbled warnings echoing from my bed. "Erase it. Don't let them in. They know how to find me now." Jennifer became nothing but faded routines, scrubbing stains that never disappeared, ignored by the town while the legend of the house grew in whispers. A neighbor slipped her a note. "Don't stay much longer. Count the voices, count the days. Never accept anything from someone who's left." The scariest part wasn't the supernatural. It was the hollow, aching despair that survived long after everyone stopped asking if she was okay. Friends dropped away. The memory of a marriage frayed, as if we'd only ever come into being to feed what the house needed from us. Never again. These were Jennifer's last words to herself. She never reopened the leftmost window, the one overlooking that cursed Maples. She checked the latch 100 times a night, but deep down, she knew there was never any real barrier between her and the world at large. I never left the hospital. My world now shrunk to white walls and a broken clock. I still murmur to the buzzing dark at night. Snuff it out. Don't let them in. Now they know me. No medicine quiets the background chorus of voices weaving tales of nights that don't belong to the living. Miles away from Ashford, the house sits empty, but only on the outside. Nobody passes the street without glancing twice, shivering at the phantom of a face caught in a window. Jennifer, no matter where she goes, feels that a part of her is still there, locked inside tile and wood, waiting for a new chance to emerge. Her life now is functionally nightmarish. Scrubbing at her hands, terrified of what might crawl up the drain. Shuddering when the scent of sour milk hits randomly, or waking with a slick taste in her mouth, as if something unwanted had crept in during sleep. The mirror shows a stranger's gaze, deeper and more watchful, as if someone is peering over her shoulder. The worst isn't what she left behind. It's what has followed her, the constant drag of knowledge that whatever touched her in the Maple House will never let go. The house is no longer a place on a map, it's inside her now. Doctors stopped asking questions, content with tidy diagnoses for what she can never explain. It isn't a disease. It's the hard lesson she can never unlearn. The terror didn't burn away with escape. It follows her in every detail. The shiver at breakfast, the sense of being watched, the stifling urge to flee. The story never really ended, and the next person to hear it might be reading this now, darkness pressing against their own walls, listening for that one unfamiliar sound on the other side. Terror finds whoever is ready for it. What about you? Which scar is pulsing right where you'd rather not probe? What would you do if you woke to the stench of spoiled milk and an unseen hand twisted your lock while you lay alone at night? Has the horror been living with you all along? If stories like this make you wonder who you truly are when you face the abyss, don't look back. But if you do, tell me, when was the exact moment your house stopped being yours and you realized the horror had already moved in for good? Subscribe, because we're all just one locked door away from discovering what really waits for us inside, right here at Portal of Dread. Would you like further tweaks for certain American cultural details, or does this adaptation hit the right mark?